an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Veronica Mars, Season 3, Episode 16, Un-American Graffiti. In this episode, a local restaurant gets targeted for a hate crime, and also, Piz is back. Where'd you go? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Agnes for commissioning this episode. Y'all, Piz. Let's just talk about Piz. Let's just do that real quick, okay? Look, I'm not going to say that I straight up forgot about Piz because I didn't really. I actually thought about him a couple times, and I don't remember if I mentioned him on the show, but I certainly specifically was like, I wonder what the hell they're doing with him, because it sort of felt like they just had him be around to be rejected, and then once she inevitably rejected him, they just didn't really know what to do with him. And I don't, it feels like he just is the second fiddle in such an extreme way that them now trying to have it be a bit of a thing between the two of them feels super duper false to me. And I'm really curious if this is like a problem for anybody else or if it's just me, because what my issue is that I could see, people, I think, you guys have mentioned to me before that when these episodes were originally airing, a lot of people actively disliked Piz. And when I first watched it, I was sort of surprised by that because he's likable enough. Like, there's nothing about him that is very memorable for me, but he wasn't actively a dickhead or anything. And then you kind of explained that it was sort of a Piz versus Logan situation, and that was how a lot of people saw it, and they were very invested in Veronica and Logan being together, and so they didn't like Piz sort of swanning in and being a threat or, just competing for her affections in any way. And it didn't feel like that was what was happening to me at the time, other than that one conversation that they have where we have, in the previously on Veronica Mars, we do get to revisit that combo. But other than that, it just didn't really feel like there was a threat. It didn't really feel like it was him versus Logan. And now I can kind of see why people felt that way. And what's so frustrating, like I said, it's really more to me about the fact that Piz is just such an afterthought. He's not in any of the episodes between that conversation that he had with Veronica. Wait, is he in the episode right after? I think he is, where he spots her and Logan, right? And that's it. We just see him like reacting to seeing the two of them together and realizing that the conversation didn't mean what he thought. And that's the last time. And it's been a minute, right? What is it? 4 or 5 episodes since then? 6? To me, it seems like at the end of this episode, she and Piz connect in a way that will be followed up on. It does not feel to me like this is over. And it seems like she and Logan are both making an attempt to seriously move on. Whether or not that actually sticks remains to be seen. I suspect it will not, but that set aside, I think that things with Piz are going to at least continue a bit longer before they fall apart. However, having Piz completely disappear from the whole show and then reappear just for this makes it feel extra shitty. It just is sort of an admission that he isn't a full character, that they don't really care about him as a person. All they want is a foil for Logan, a fallback for Veronica, And it just makes it seem like he's a cardboard cutout of a guy in a rom-com that's meant to be standing off to the side, like, just ready to catch her when she falls. And it sucks. It really, you know, I have no problem with Piz as a character, but that's because he isn't really much of a character. He's been around a bit, and he's cute, and he makes, like, you know, the occasional witty response to things. But honestly, who cares, right? Is it just me? So, I mean, always, in everything that I cover, the romances tend to be the things that fall flat for me. Just tend to. Because I find it to be difficult to really believe in the chemistry that actors have together. And the relationships are often just mined for drama that is easy and lazy. And this season feels like it's relying on that in a way that other seasons of this show have not. We have certainly had, plenty of relationship drama in previous seasons. I mean, the whole thing with Duncan was very well done in finding out that he is actually somehow related to Veronica, if I'm not mistaken. Was that it? Or I don't even remember there was something that happened that caused the two of them to not like be together. It's been so long now. It's been like 3 years that I've been covering this, and I'm only in the 3rd season. It's kind of crazy. But that actually like held up because their relationship had been happening before the show began. Then there was a major tragedy, and it really felt like he thought she was his sister. That's right. Thank you, Rachel. And it really felt like the fallout of their relationship was much more a side effect of the murder. So it wasn't like the focus of everything. And they didn't have to do any mining of their relationship for drama because the drama just happened to be part of the overall story. And so it all worked together. But this season, because there's no ongoing murder or mystery, which I cannot emphasize enough to you how baffled I am by this, you guys. We had the whole rape thing in the first third of the season, then the central third to do with the dean, and now I guess we're going to get something else for this last section. I really thought this episode, because the previous one wrapped up the dean's murder, I thought that this episode would start a new arc of a mystery. And it doesn't. Instead, we get two, like, sort of case closed situations. Well, not exactly case closed, but we have Veronica dealing with the hate crime. And we have her dad battling the fake IDs and underage drinking. So, not another ongoing mystery being inserted into the story. And I actually did find it, like, there's only 5 episodes left this season. I'm starting to wonder if they're going to have another one or not. And I don't know why they did it this way. Because there could have been something else that they roped Veronica into that would also include Logan, and that would naturally lead to some stress in their relationship that would work in the whole story. But instead they have Logan have absolutely nothing to do with either mystery. The whole rape thing, Logan is very separate from it, other than the fact that he's friends with Dick, who is part of the, like, frat scene and is generally, a rapist and rape apologist. And then with the Dean's murder, Logan's just absolutely not connected to that in any way. And plus they break up during that time, so he's around even less. So it's just super unnatural when we have to go back into relationship mode because it doesn't feel connected to anything else. And I think that the assumption by the writers was that at this point, because there have been a couple seasons of the show so far, Logan has been around since the beginning, that probably everybody has gotten invested enough in them as characters that whether he's involved in the mystery doesn't matter. And maybe that was true for people while it was airing. But I will just... It is absolutely not true for me. if he doesn't have anything to do with all of the shit that is important to Veronica, then I don't understand why he's important to her. You know, it's not like investigating this stuff is a priority to him. He has actively told her to stay out of it more than once. There isn't a reason that I can see why they should even want to be together. They don't get along. Their chemistry is eh. They don't have similar backgrounds or goals in life. And it's just not... So I'm hoping that this episode is an indicator that actually they are each going to be moving on from each other. But I'm really worried that it's not. And if it's not, it feels like such a waste of time. You know? Let's see. Tori says, honestly, this season, Piz, Logan, Wallace are tragically misused. Yeah, Wallace. There goes another one that it just feels like, yikes, what are we even doing with this guy? For, you know, a look at using side characters extremely well, check out Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, where they realize that people can't be constantly involved in the main character's life, and they've learned how to give them their own things to do, their own arcs, their own conflicts. They have those characters getting together. And that works amazingly because we've grown very invested in all of them. But with the whole thing with Logan, I said, you know, and I stand by this, I actually rather liked the thing with the like scavenger hunt with all of them. It did feel super out of place, but it was fun enough to watch. And a part of that is because Mac was there. I haven't really gotten to know Parker as well as I feel like I should. She kind of just feels bland to me. And, you know, I guess this episode is meant to be that, is Mac broken up with her boyfriend? Because she starts flirting with a guy from the other episode who shows up and is worried that his friends paid her because she like is laughing at his jokes and actually gets along with him. That was a really good moment, to be honest. Him like suddenly getting over paranoid again, because you would, wouldn't you? Finding out that your friends like paid somebody to pretend to like you, that would make you absolutely, completely paranoid for the rest of your life. Like, I just would never be able to get over that personally. Ariel says, no, they're still together. Oh, then I feel bad for him because he's like getting sort of into Mac in that scene and he doesn't realize, I don't think, that she's with somebody. Well, sorry, buddy. Better luck next time. But yeah, Parker and then, you know, Mac's boyfriend, whom I really, really liked in the episode that he played a major part in, but he hasn't been around either. I'm not invested in them too much. So I would have enjoyed an episode of just Logan and Mac, to be honest, without the others, without there being a whole romantic thing. But I will say something that I did like about the romance for this episode is how interesting they've decided to make Logan more loving and romantic with Parker than he ever was with Veronica. And this is one of those unfortunate things that happens. And it's just, you know, it's natural. And it's honestly, when you step back and look at it, it's a good thing. But in the moment, it feels really shitty. When you end a relationship with somebody, the point of doing anything in life is to learn from it and to grow as a person, including being in relationships. A lot of us have the goal of staying with the person that we're with, but that isn't always possible or actually something we want in the end. But due to the fact that the relationship is a learning experience, what happens is after that relationship is over, you go on to the next one and you take what you learned from the previous relationship and apply it to the new one in a way that makes your ex sort of resentful because they see you being better and different with someone else than you were with them. And I know I had this when I split up with Brendan. All of a sudden he started taking trips with his new girlfriend to like San Francisco, things like that. And I absolutely had to like twist his arm. We literally didn't take a honeymoon. He took one day off from work after we got married, and that's all. And we finally took a trip together because I got some insurance money from my dad's death. That was why. We used my dad's death money to go on a trip about 2 months after he died. And while we were away, the day before we left, my grandmother died, and while we were gone was her funeral. So it was like the most depressing thing ever. And those were my trips that I got to take with him. And yet, as soon as we split and he got with this new girl, all of a sudden, he's traveling all over the place and taking these vacations with her. And I would be a complete liar if I didn't say that I was just like, oh, wow, okay. So it wasn't that you couldn't find the time. It wasn't that we couldn't afford it. It wasn't any of that. You just didn't fucking care enough. You just didn't want to put in the effort. I wasn't worth the effort to you, and she is. Cool. Well, good. I'm glad I know that now. And, you know, genuinely, that probably is what was happening. He probably is just more into her than he was into me, because that's what happens. But it was so hurtful to like watch that from the outside and realize like, wow, he's treating her completely differently. What the fuck? And I'm certain that he has been, you know, if he is at all aware of what's going on with me, that he has been seeing some of the ways that I have been behaving and some of the things that I have said or stances that I'm taking on things that weren't the way that I was talking or behaving way back. And he probably has the same sort of reaction where he's just like, wow, well, you argued with me about that for like half an hour, but all of a sudden now you're acting like that's exactly the truth. Cool. And that's part of relationships, man. That's the thing. You either are with someone and watch them change, or you're with someone and they leave you and then you watch them change with somebody else. That's just like that's what happens. And it's natural and it's good. It's actually an indication if somebody's behaving very differently in a new relationship, it can mean that they are a person who does some self-reflection and is aware of their own shortcomings, and they're actively attempting to be better, which a lot of people don't actually try and do. Like, there are so many folks out there that they leave a relationship and go into a new one and behave the precise same way because they are so certain the previous relationship failed due to the other person and not through any fault of their own. So they'll just go on and act the same and make the same mistakes. But if they're not doing that, it means maybe they're aware that they fucked up and they're trying to do better, which is great for them. But it doesn't make you feel great in the moment, you know? Let's see. Sal D'Souza's here. Hi. Tori says, yeah, I try not to see what my exes are doing because that's what happens a lot. I had a friend date a girl for 11 years, married the next girlfriend at 1 year. It was a little of a yikes moment in our friends, but he's happy. And you know, like, the whole thing with Brendan too, we were like barely split up. So I couldn't help but find out what he was doing because we were still in communications about like getting our divorce settlement underway and moving things out of the house and sending them to me. But yeah, I've blocked him on Facebook because I'm just like, I'm not interested anymore. I already know enough and it makes me annoyed and I just don't need to do this again. So there are two moments where Veronica, like, it really seems obvious that she doesn't know what to think. The first one is when she's talking to Mac and she's like, you and Logan seem really chummy. And Max says, yeah, well, you know, in the past, I just kind of always saw him being a jerk and sullen. And now I'm getting to see his sweet side, which I guess is the side that you saw. And Veronica's response is, right, sweet. And I really appreciated this because it sort of felt like the show was admitting, hey, Logan was kind of an asshole to her a lot of the time. I don't know if they are admitting that or not, but it feels like it to me. Like they're going, yeah, we know. He wasn't great. And that's sort of what makes me worry that they're going to wind up back together after all, is this sense of, we're going to send Logan off to be with somebody else so that he can discover some things about himself and be better so that when he comes back to Veronica, he's a new and improved Logan. And I just kind of don't want that, you know. Also, what he did, I'm not interested in forgiving him for that either, you know. So there's that moment, and then later on, he gets this birthday cake for Parker. I think because she says something like, "Oh my God, you remembered." And I think that she is reacting to maybe her having spoken about a specific cake place or something. I didn't really know whether she meant just, "Oh, you remembered my birthday." I feel like she was talking about like the fact that he got the cake though. And when he opens the cake, it's like a photo of the two of them has been printed on the cake. And she is, you know, it says like, "Happy birthday, Parker." And it's obvious that this was probably pretty expensive. He went to some trouble. And you can see Veronica be like, "He never did this for me at all." This is part of the problem too with trying too hard to be the cool girlfriend. I think a lot of women fall into this trap where we have seen so much media that encourages us to accept the bare minimum because we don't want to be a harpy. We don't want to be high maintenance. We don't want to be a nag. So we accept far less than we actually want. And because that guy that we're with, sometimes women, but this usually applies to hetero relationships the most, they see that we're willing to accept so little and they begin to intend even less. You know, they like, because what you get at the beginning of a relationship is usually peak performance. People are at their very best at the start. They're trying very hard to impress you. They are courting you, actively coming up with ideas, wanting to put their best foot forward. So if they're not even doing that at the start, it's sort of an indication that they're going to just get worse and less caring from there. And I could really see Veronica, I think it's a shame. She dated two incredibly wealthy dudes. And I could see her being so eager to keep people from thinking that she's a gold digger, that she like pushes back against getting gifts or getting treated a certain way because she doesn't want it to look like that's what she's after. And they begin to just sort of pull back entirely on the effort aspect of things altogether. And this is what can be so frustrating too about like the miscommunications that happen, because a lot of dudes do think that it's the money, like that women respond to when somebody does something incredibly over the top. But the truth is, it doesn't have to be an expensive thing. It just has to be thoughtful, and it has to have cost you effort. That's the price that we want you to have paid. I'm not impressed by an extravagant gift if all you did was click a button online and wait for it to be delivered. I mean, I'll appreciate the gift in and of itself, but it won't impress me unless that's something that you worked and saved up for. You know, that's different. But somebody like Logan, if he were to buy me something really expensive, it wouldn't feel significant because I know that he can afford it with no problem. He's not sacrificing anything for that. And it probably took no effort to do this, you know. But going and choosing a cake, getting a photo for them, picking it up, setting the party up, that's thought, you know, that's making an effort. That's the kind of thing that means something in the end. That's the shit that you remember, you know? So the look that Veronica gets on her face, I really like her acting because she really manages to get across the simultaneous feeling of like, what the fuck? And I really just want to be happy for her. I really don't want to make this into a thing right now. You know, like you can see that she's trying so hard not to be a dick about it. And Parker is so appreciative of the fact that she's like being cool. And Veronica starts to say, I've never seen him like this. And she kind of like cuts herself off and changes the way that she says it. because she doesn't want to start a thing. And I appreciate it. I appreciate both of them attempting as much as they can to be grown-ups about this. He runs into her making out with Piz in the elevator. It's the elevator, right? Later. And, you know, it's the kind of thing where he could be really angry and storm off. But that's not what they do. They have him clearly have an emotional reaction. He sees her and it's obvious that he's like, shit. But he isn't an asshole about it. There's no possessiveness. There's no, attempt at a guilt trip or anything. They're both really trying to just let the other person be happy. And that is a very difficult thing to do. And I liked the way that this was handled between the two of them. It's honestly, them navigating their breakup is the most that I have liked either one of them in terms of their relationship with each other this season. So, I don't know. And that's pretty much everything that goes on with the two of them. I feel like I've covered all of it, but I did really appreciate the forward movement with her and Piz, even though, Piz himself, I'm just kind of like, whatever. But the fact that there is a moment where Logan has to be put to the test too, in terms of how cool he's going to be when she starts to move on with somebody else. That's an important thing to know. We can applaud her being mature, but we need to sort of see the way he's going to be. And he just does his best. It's not easy and it's not great, but, I do feel a little bit bad over the fact that Veronica sort of pulls away from Piz as a result of running into Logan, though. I don't want, if she's going to get with Piz, then just do that. But don't make Logan like the factor, So let's talk about the mystery this episode. What is so funny to me here? So she gets approached by this woman, who comes into the office that her father has had to sort of vacate because now he's the sheriff. And she is looking for somebody to help her deal with the vandalism to their shop. Somebody spray painted terrorists across their restaurant windows. And it turns out they are Arabic, I think. And Veronica goes to do a bit of a stakeout outside the restaurant. And what I found so funny here is she's sitting and watching from the car, and she gets approached by this girl who knocks on the window. And what we get is this amazing sort of weird, it's like the show is lampshading the fact that we've never heard of or seen this girl before. So she says, Veronica Mars, Amira, long time no see. Yeah, since my senior year when you made my pirate points worthless. And Veronica specifically says, I heard you were at Hearst, but I haven't seen ya. Yeah, different circles, I guess. I just found this really funny. It's the show being like, yeah, we know that you haven't seen her before, but trust us, she's been around, okay? Just shut up. And she asks Veronica what the hell she's doing here. And when Veronica explains, she's sort of she acts as if she really doesn't think this is valid. She just is like, well, have a blast, and walks away. I don't know if she even is aware of the vandalism, but I don't know how she couldn't be. And Veronica talks to the parents. The father isn't super on board with her being, investigating this whole thing. And they are standing outside talking about this when a truck drives by, and a bunch of kids in the back of the truck paintball them. And it turns out that incident isn't even related to the vandalism, which I found a little bit odd. But Veronica winds up tracking these kids down, and one of them is Middle Eastern, and she's sort of like, what the fuck? And I'll admit, I was a little worried too, guys, because like we had a whole like, oh, they were lying about the rapes. The feminists were the bad guys the whole time kind of thing in the first mystery of the season. So I was like, if they decide that they're going to have an Arabic person committing hate crimes against Arabs, I'm going to be so fucking irritated. Thank God that was not what it was about. But I had a real moment there for a second. I won't lie. But yeah, she tracks them down, and she, manages to get them to admit that this is something that they do. And they actually have film of themselves like attacking other random people. I can't tell you guys how, like, I really want these kids to be punished for this. When you hit somebody with a paintball, it hurts. It ruins their clothes, and it fucks up their day. And this is meant to be sort of played like, oh, well, this wasn't a hate crime, so it's fine. But I wanted something to happen to them. She notices that they got Mr. Clemens at one time. And she shoots a couple of these kids also. That was at least something. It was a bit of a satisfying moment. Any more drive-bys, and that finds its way to the sheriff. And I was like, nah, man, come on. Just like let them get in trouble for it for real. They clean up the damage due to the paintballs with the restaurant, but wasn't enough for me. So Veronica encourages them to hang up a flag. I'm not exactly sure what it, like, if it's like the name of the restaurant, and if it's just in like Farsi. Is it called Farsi if it's like the written language? I know some languages are called a different thing when it's text versus spoken. But she basically, the wife is sort of worried that this is going to wind up being make them more of a target. But Veronica encourages this kind of because she wants them to become a target, to be perfectly honest. And she sees this one guy come up and sort of poke around near the restaurant on the security footage. So she tracks that guy down. And there's someone hanging out in the fucking tree outside this dude's window taking photos. And they drop down from the tree and run off. And Veronica gets out of the car and walks up to the front door. And there's the dude, and he's got Amira with him. And it turns out Amira is fucking around with this guy, and he's Jewish. And this is super duper frowned upon by both of their communities and could cause a lot of trouble. And the guy that was taking the photos through the window was somebody that she had been intended to marry. And so, they were evidently going to do the like sort of old-fashioned arranged marriage thing, but she was able to get out of it. And the impression that I get is like they were willing to let her not have the arranged marriage, but being involved with someone Jewish is a bridge too far. And she asks Veronica to please get the photos back, which Veronica does in a very long, drawn-out scene that unfortunately doesn't wind up really mattering at all. I was a little bit bummed at how this was rendered kind of pointless in the end. But she goes into the place where he went to get the photos developed and pretends that she's his girlfriend and tricks the clerk behind the counter and takes the photos. And she really thinks that she's got them and that, there's nothing this guy can do now, because what he's going to do is show them to Amira's father. Unfortunately for Veronica, it turns out that the developer machine got jammed. So there are some half-developed photos remaining, even though she picked them up. So Veronica goes to Amira and tells her like it's all taken care of. And then like a second later, her father pounds on the door and has, you know, that half of a photo, and that's all they need. And I just felt like, why did we just go through all of that then? Oh my God. Just have it be that Veronica isn't able to catch up with him or something. I don't know. Maybe the show maybe the writers can't handle Veronica not managing to like at least win a little most of the time. But yeah, so her father freaks out and is saying, you know, that both communities will make this a huge problem. And that if she's going to continue with this relationship, the restaurant is no longer your concern. To Veronica, you're fired. And Veronica says, I work for your wife. If she wants me fired, she can give me a call. And I rather liked that response. Just being like, you can try and fire me, but that's not how this works, buddy. You're not the one who hired me. In the end, Veronica tracks down the person that did it I'm trying to remember exactly how she figures out who it is, because she gets the footage of the one guy and asks the mom, but that turns out to be the guy that Amira is sleeping with. Is it trying to find the spot, because she finds him in an alley that looks like the same spot. Oh, that's right. She put a tracker in the flag that he stole and burned. And she tracks it to an alley, and he winds up pulling up in his truck. And it was sort of funny because he's wearing American Eagle, not American Eagle the brand, but an Eagle t-shirt that's meant to be sort of rah rah America. But Veronica is also wearing a shirt that's sort of like that. I wish that I could see what it said on hers, because his says born free. It's an eagle, spread wings in front of the American flag, says born free underneath. Hers, she's wearing a blazer over it, and I couldn't tell exactly what it said. Sal says, I thought the scene with her flirting with the guy was hilarious, especially at the time. I don't really feel many Middle Eastern men were considered attractive. Oh yeah, because when she says something to Amira about it, she's like, are you sure you don't want to be with that dude? Because he has these cheekbones that are practically in his forehead. And these full lips, he's got a gorgeous face. But it was just, I guess that is why they probably did that. You're right, Sal, is just oh, we think that this is a funny scenario. But I have such anxiety that for me, I'm just I don't want to go through that if it turns out it didn't do any good, I remember the comedy of it much less than I remember the anxiety. But I probably am a bit of an exception in that, because I just have bad anxiety, man. I just do. So she's talking to this guy, and she says, are you just some close-minded redneck who thinks it's his patriotic duty to harass innocent people? And he says, not quite, and goes around to the other side of the van. And she sees his brother being lowered down in a wheelchair, and he evidently was injured abroad, and his brother is holding a grudge against, the people who did this to his brother, perceived did this. But also, there was a specific thing that triggered this response from him. And he goes up to the front of the cab and pulls out this flyer that is a cartoon of soldiers going in one side of a giant, square, what's the word I want? Stylized word, Iraq. And there is somebody with a headscarf peeking out over the edge of the word and laughing. And then on the other end, from where the soldiers went in, are American flag covered coffins dripping in blood coming out the other side. And there's like a little figure at the bottom who says something like, looks like he had a one-way ticket. It is an incredibly bad taste. I found it really odd later when the owner of the restaurant, I can't remember his name, and he says something like, I support his right to free speech. And I was like, I mean, I guess. This is just so incendiary without a real message to me that it feels really gratuitous. In a way that just doesn't, it's not accomplishing anything, and there's no like moral to it other than like, haha, we're killing you. Which is that, like, I totally get that still falls within the right to free speech, technically. But also, like, what are you saying with your free speech? What is this even? It's just gross. It's just, like, and it's, he's exactly, Ariel says it's trolling. That was like, basically what I was going to say is he's just trying to provoke a fucking reaction, and he got one. This is sort of what he's after. But it just, I don't know. It was sort of a weird thing that the show was like, we're going to have a hate crime, but we're also going to have it be like a both sides thing where, maybe one of the people involved did kind of deserve it because they were encouraging a whole thing. And I was like, really? Like, I take a very dim view, especially over the past several years, seeing how much damage the both sides thing has done to discourse in our country. We really try and act like everybody deserves to be heard, and that's just not true. Some people are hateful. Some people are divisive for no reason other than they sort of get off on it. And some people just like to stoke flames because they want to be at the center of something and they want to feel important. And because of how poorly the first third of this season was handled with the rape story, I don't trust the writers anymore. And I don't trust their judgment on handling pretty delicate issues like this. So for me, I had kind of a knee-jerk reaction when I realized what this episode was going to focus on. Like I said, when we run into the kids who did the thing with the paintballs, and I realized that one of them was meant to be Middle Eastern, maybe Arab, I don't think that's specified. But I definitely had a moment of like, oh my God, they're not. And they weren't. But then they do this, where they're like, yeah, some dude definitely was like fucked up, but also he had his own reasons. And I guess... it's just, I just don't, it sort of presents this like front to xenophobia and racism that makes it sound like, well, the people who are behaving this way have their own very real concerns. And there's a veneer to these sorts of stories that make it seem as if probably they went through something like this and you don't know. You don't know what they went through, what their family went through. So yeah, they may have hate in their heart, but perhaps that's due to something that's real. But like the vast majority of people who foster these sorts of views, no, they don't. They don't have something in their history to explain it. There's nothing personal that happened to them. They are just hateful, closed-minded people. And so I just don't love these sorts of examples being put out there in pop culture because I feel like people take this shit more seriously and more to heart than any of us would like to admit. And by this shit, I mean what pop culture says about certain issues. It's something that I think back a lot to various things that I have read and when I was much younger, that I look back and I realize like, oh, I absorbed that point of view completely and believed it. And it was something really problematic, whether it was a book or a TV show or something that had like a genuinely kind of fucked up message that it took me ages to unlearn, because I watched it at a formative point in my life and I sort of like took it for granted that if it was on television or if it was in a book and had been published, then there must be some validity to it. I didn't understand how little anything is sort of like the veracity of something matters, you know? So watching this sort of thing at the age of like 13, I think would have shaped the way that I saw xenophobia and racism, where I would have been like, well, but we don't know what happened to them. Maybe they have good reasons to feel the way they do. We don't know. I really feel like this would have had an impact on me and my viewpoints on that at the time. Now, I can see it as being just this sort of wishy-washy non-story. But I just think this sort of thing does real damage, you know? And this is exactly how I felt about the rape storyline. It's the sort of thing that, as a young person watching, I would remember, oh, the feminists were lying. They invented a rape. They faked not the whole thing, but they faked enough and came across as really hateful. I don't want to come across as hateful, so I'm not going to call myself feminist because I don't want to be perceived like them in the show. And B, I don't trust the accounts of women because they have ulterior motives. And I know that would have been the way I took in that message, because I read a book where there was a whole subplot of this woman who had faked a rape in order to get back at this guy. And I know that that played a part in me believing in the like fake rape cases. And I had to like actively research to unlearn that preconception that this fiction fed into. And it was fiction, but it nevertheless, it had an effect. And I really feel like people who act as if we're getting over offended by stuff because it's just fiction, it's just a story, it's just a show or a book, who cares? I don't think they realize like how that gets into the psyche of people who see it or read it, and it just fucking settles into the nooks and crannies, and it's hard to get it out again. Let's see. Ariel says, it seems to say life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Oh, okay. Tori says, yeah, she wore that shirt before. I just did a bit of research. Doesn't seem to message except all the American propaganda hedging. They wanted to say something, but they also wanted to stay on air, so they fumbled. That's exactly it. And that's what I feel about the rape thing, too. They wanted to do something sort of edgy and like address an issue that probably was like coming more to the fore at the time, you know, the violence against Muslim people and Middle Eastern people. They don't even have to be Muslim because Americans can't fucking tell the difference. So, you know, it doesn't matter. And also like rape cases on campus, they were probably like somewhat hot button topics that they were like, oh yeah, we should definitely do something with this. But they didn't want to really take a stand on it. And that is why you don't pick those sorts of topics. If you don't have the fucking confidence to actually come down on one side and say something specific, what are you doing? Just don't. Don't do it. Nobody put a gun to your head and was like, you have to do a hate crime episode. No, this could have been, you know, just like vandalism for a pure like grudge. Some interfamily thing, or, you know, who knows? It could have been any number of things. Just avoid this entirely. You don't have to. And I just hope that like there isn't another episode like this season where they really try and take on something that's sort of a heavy topic and then just completely like say nothing with it. So, and like the whole thing too, when she winds up telling the owner of the restaurant what the deal is, he says that he wants to meet the guy himself. And he goes to talk to this kid that did this vandalism and tries to do the whole, like, you're what you're doing to us mocks the sacrifice of your brother. We all came from somewhere else. We are all just trying to make it in America. Whatever you stand for, you're supposed to get a fair shot. That's what your brother was fighting for, in case you wanted to know. And he just says, so turn me in, Alibaba. Makes no difference to me. I will say I appreciated that there isn't a warm and fuzzy moment between the two of them where they suddenly come to terms. At the very least, I was like, okay, thank you. Because that really would have taken it to a whole other level. And Veronica is about to just turn him in anyway. Because she's a champ. But he says that he doesn't want to press charges. And then as they're walking away, he's talking to his wife about, I can't remember the name of the guy who works in the kitchen that she was meant to marry. But she is asking, first of all, whether you're okay with your daughter dating a Jew. Maybe you should apply what you just said to him, to our situation. And Nasir, that is his name. And what about Nasir? And this is when he says, I support his right to free speech, but that doesn't mean that I have to support him or shelter him. The cartoon pissed me off. It was un-American. And it turns out that he's on an expired visa. So he turns him in to get him brought to immigration. See, again, context changes, right? So for me, this whole thing felt so weird because the message is completely hateful. Absolutely. And I'm not actually mad at him choosing to handle it this way because it's a pretty smart move, actually. It gets this guy out of your hair personally. It gets him probably out of the country if he's deported so that you don't have like somebody who feels this way about Americans like potentially around to cause any harm. But also because we have been having such fraught relations with other countries regarding travel and immigration specifically, it just feels really cruel. And it's just that he's the only one that gets punished, you know, like this dude who actually committed the crime and this dude's like, well, I'm not going to press charges. Don't call the cops. But then he turns his own person in. And it's just, you know, what the message is really that they're saying in the end is if you come to America, you better prioritize white people and you better prioritize America. But, you know, like you better become less foreign is kind of the vibe that I got from this. The fact that he says like that cartoon pissed me off. It was un-American. And that's the like framing device that's used. I was like, oh, ew. You know, I don't know. And I think part of the deal with them like deciding not to press charges is that the kid who committed the vandalism he has a record. So he'd like do prison time if they turned him in. And they don't want to do that. But I mean, we didn't have to add that into the story that he had prison time and would do jail time. How about he doesn't have a record and he just gets punished at all? That's what we could have done. Why did you write it in such a way that he doesn't get any consequences for his actions whatsoever? You chose to write it like that. Why? What's the deal? Yep. Ariel says, so the white guy gets off scot-free and the brown guy gets deported. Not a great look. Yeah. Yeah. It's just, you know, and it does not escape me at all either that everybody but Nasir is dressed in Western clothing. Nasir is the only one that is still wearing traditional dress. And that is shorthand for he's a dangerous radical. That feeds right into the stereotype that this show is like allegedly against, but it doesn't feel like they are. It feels like they're doing the fucking exact thing they're claiming is so terrible. It's just fucked up. It was bad. It was badly done. Damaging. Just, It's such a bummer, man. I'm so disappointed in this season, guys. I'm just going to be straight up with you. You know from my coverage of this, but like, I can't get over what a tight, tense season the first one was. And I am absolutely heartbroken at how completely it has fallen apart. This third season is a disaster. It is all over the place. It's like they don't know who anybody is anymore. They don't know what they want to say or do. They have no objective. There was no planning. It just feels like they're completely pulling shit out of thin air with every new episode. And I'm just sitting here like, what are you doing? It's weird. Did something happen? Did they get a completely new set of writers? What happened? It just feels like a different show. It really does. We've got a bunch of the characters that we recognize, but they don't even feel like the same people. I don't know. I didn't really talk much. I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to have to do this sort of quick. But let's see. Ariel says only a few left and then the movie. But then there's season 4, which that has started to be commissioned. Tori says they did technically change networks. I wonder if that had anything to do with it. I don't know. It's just, again, with the fact that there isn't one comprehensive mystery for the whole season, that I feel like is a major mistake. Having there be a series of mysteries doesn't work. It's just not cohesive enough. Rachel says, honestly, I was on the fence about whether it was worth continuing to commission, but wrapping up the rape storyline seemed worth it. I mean, yeah, like, if you guys hadn't commissioned season 3, I wouldn't have been, like, mad about it or anything, but I would have been like, really? But if you hadn't, and then I had gone on to watch this by myself, which I likely would have done, I probably would have been like, oh, I sort of get why you didn't now. You know, I would understand. I'm not mad at covering it because, you know, you guys know what I'm gonna think a lot of the time. I think I'm pretty consistent, mostly. Ready Player One and my response to that, notwithstanding, most of the time, I feel like I'm pretty consistent. So the fact that y'all commissioned it, I am prepared to be honest because I think you guys know. I'm not saying anything to you that you didn't know already, you know, but it is just like, I just feel like it's a totally different show and they just slapped the same name on it and they like CGI'd the character faces over and that's as close a resemblance as it has to anything else. Rachel says, I think they were scrambling to do anything to get renewed, honestly. It definitely was not as well plotted or thought out as season 1. Ariel says it only has 8 episodes. Is that season 4 then? I didn't realize that it was that short. Tori says, but I love hearing how you explain it. Well, that's good. Like, see, and this is how people are apparently feeling about like Doctor Who. I have been hating this season, but people seem okay with that because they sort of have problems with it themselves. And they're just kind of like, I just want to hear you sort of break down what the fucking issues are. And if y'all understand that and that's what you want, then good, because that's what I'm doing, you know? So talking about Keith and what happened with him, it's sort of a weird thing. The episode starts off with this kid at a bar, obviously underage. And the kid is like slumped over, barely even able to like put a sentence together. And this bartender slides his receipt over to him and tells him to sign his tab and get going. And the kid stumbles across the street. It's the sort of thing where even as the bartender is like, you got to head out of here, I'm like, dude, you're telling this kid to like drive home. Get a cab for him. What are you doing? But he does not do that. And this kid stumbles across, gets hit, and later on we find out that he may never walk again. I don't know if it was a hit and run, or because I don't feel like we actually see, I'm trying to see exactly how this goes. I feel like we just see that he gets hit. He's got some really bad drunk acting too. Yeah, we don't see the hit. We just see like a flash of light and then it cuts. So I don't know if that's meant to be an ongoing mystery is finding out who hit him. But I feel like if somebody hit him hard enough to that he isn't going to walk again, I don't know how. It was a pretty crowded area, how they wouldn't have caught them. Hit and runs happen for sure, but I always tend to think of that happening in places where either there aren't a lot of people outside at the time, like in a residential area, or in a really remote area. And he's like on a busy strip in the middle of the city, and there's likely like, security cameras and stuff. So I don't know. I don't know if that's anything. But this gets Keith really cracking down on area bars. And it turns out that his cops have been pretty much letting all of these kids get away with underage drinking on purpose. Like, they are aware it's happening and they're completely turning a blind eye to it. And Keith finds Wallace and Piz in a bar, knows for sure they're underage. And when he sees their IDs, they look really real. And he realizes, this is Veronica's work. Oh my God, bitch, really? And he goes home and talks to her about it, and she is suitably chastised. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry. But he winds up using them as plants a little bit later and has them in the bar with the walkie-talkie going in order to trap the cops that were letting everybody get away with it. And then he fires them. And this is one of those scenes where, God, it would be nice if this shit happened. Because this dude is like, well, if we walk, we've worked together forever. If we walk, they'll all walk. And Keith basically is like, fine, walk then. And unsurprisingly, not as many people have this guy's back as he originally thought would. Despite that, though, it's just probably going to cause some ongoing trouble for Keith. He has an election coming, right? Like, this whole thing is a temporary situation because of Sheriff Lamb dying. But he isn't just by default in this position. And I can't help but think this might come to bite him in the ass again later. I won't lie, though. It is really nice to see some cops being held fucking responsible. Unfortunately, it's not for anything as serious as murder. But, good God, it is really just a fantasy scenario. So, we'll see how that falls out. But I feel like that isn't going to go well for him. I'm cheering him on in the moment. But privately, I'm going, ooh, Keith, this is going to get ugly. But I'm proud of you. But yikes. But good. But yikes. So, yeah, that's everything. I'm over time, so I really do have to go. But thank you guys all so much for being in the chat. It really does help to hear I'm not alone in perceiving things the way that I do too. Because I don't like to rail on something. If especially if the chat is totally empty, it makes me sort of worry that oh my God, what if I'm just being really hard on this and the people listening don't agree with me at all? But when y'all are in the chat and you're being no, yeah, that's definitely what happened there. I'm like, okay, good. Because I just don't want to be too hard on shit. And sometimes that happens. You'll catch me in a bad mood, or I'll have just read an article about something. And so when it's referenced in a show, I'm fucking extra sensitive about it. But, I don't think that's usually the case. But anyway, yeah. So thank you guys very much. And thank you to Agnes for commissioning this episode. Agnes, if you're out there, hope you enjoyed it. And I will be seeing you all, let's see, when's the next one? I'll be seeing you, next Friday, a week from today, with Debasement Tapes. Dun dun dun. All right, until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.